Hello everyone. As always, it is good to be able to talk with you again. If you've never been with me before, welcome to those valiant warriors for truth out there who comprise my small but loyal following. Welcome back. You have tuned in to the 15th installment of The Patriot Preacher. I am Charles Wells, and we are here to address all the issues of the day that people arduously debate every day. Today's topic, although not as emotional as abortion, which was our last segment, is still a very polarizing topic for many. Today we're going to discuss capital punishment. The last public execution in the United States occurred in Owensboro, Kentucky on August 14th, 1936. Rainey Bethea, a 27-year-old black man, was publicly hanged for the rape and murder of a 70-year-old white woman. Because of the racial component of the story, people came from all around to witness the event, selling everything from sandwiches to Coca-Cola. Witnesses have described it as more of a big picnic than an execution. The media circus surrounding the event embarrassed officials so much that it led to the end of public executions not only in Kentucky, but in the entire country. Between 1970 and 2018, the federal government has executed 14 convicted criminals, and the individual states have executed 1,490 people across the 34 states that either allow or have allowed executions in the past. As a side note, my home state of Texas has accounted for more than a third of all executions. For those of you who are familiar with my stances on other issues, you know that my thought processes and belief system is planted firmly on the conservative side of most issues. However, I will probably be going against the grain on this particular issue, because while I very much understand and sympathize with anyone who believes that capital punishment should be the law of the land, it will undoubtedly surprise some of my listeners by me coming out against it. And while many of my videos are rife with statistical analysis, this one will be a simple discussion, and at the end of it, I will leave it to you to come to your own conclusions. There is probably no bigger philosophical divide than what exists between capital punishment abolitionists, those who want capital punishment done away with, and capital punishment advocates. To be truthful, I was on the fence about this particular topic for many years. It took a lot of soul searching on my part and a maturation of my reasoning to finally come to the conclusion that I have. First of all, we have all been taught that justice is supposed to be blind, meaning that those appointed in positions of power to determine who should be allowed to live or die should be blind as to who they are dealing with, and therefore should only deal with the facts of the case, regardless of race, creed, or for that matter, any other arbitrary factor. But I can assure you from personally dealing with the justice system on behalf of my family members and friends who have gotten into legal scrapes, not murder, that justice is in fact far from blind. I don't believe it to be as racially biased as it has been portrayed to be, but more than it is economically biased. Most people who cannot afford to hire a decent lawyer and depend solely upon court-appointed attorneys for their fate are much more likely to be railroaded into stiffer sentences than is someone who has an ample amount of money to hire sufficiently motivated representation. It is simply a matter of money that can mean the difference between serving 4 years or 40 years. I'm quite sure that this principle is no different with murder. There is also the issue of overzealous DAs and prosecutors who will often pursue the path of least resistance in order to achieve a higher success rate for their careers. And I have never heard a prosecutor yet who has admitted that they were wrong, even in cases where it was proven otherwise at a later time. And all murder is not treated the same. We depend entirely on the subjective nature of justice as it is interpreted by humans and how we apply the death penalty. If someone commits a very heinous act against another human being by either demonstrating no discernible emotions to the violent acts they commit on one extreme, to actually seemingly receive some sort of pleasure from their depravity on the other extreme, we tend to give these people a sentence of death. But isn't all murder the same if it is in fact murder and not an accidental killing? Murder is the ultimate theft of another human being's potential. You are basically taking everything from them and everything they had the potential of ever being. You are also taking a loved one away from those who were the closest to the victim. If we are going to apply the death penalty, shouldn't it in fact be universally applied to anyone who purposely murders another human being, and not just a select few that we determine to be particularly evil? We also have the unique thought process in this country that someone should be innocent until proven guilty, and not the other way around. The reasoning behind this is that we would rather let someone go who is guilty rather than risk punishing someone who is innocent. But the death penalty kind of runs afoul of that principle to some degree. There is no doubt that people have been imprisoned who were innocent. While admittedly this seems to be a small percentage, if, for example, there are in fact 2.3 million people serving sentences of some sort in this country, and even 0.5% of them, 1 in 200, turn out to be innocent, that means there will be about 11,500 people serving time for something they didn't commit. The innocent are imprisoned for a number of reasons. Inadequate defense, either because of ineptness or indifference on the part of the defense, false confessions, eyewitness misidentification, false testimony, overzealous DAs, or faulty circumstantial evidence, just to name a few. The Innocence Project has freed at least 150 innocent people who were previously placed on death row for crimes they did not commit. While this is a small number in relation to how many people who have been convicted, you have to ask yourself, if we know about the 150, how many more are there which we will never find out about? After all, just like in abortion, once we've made a decision to kill someone, we can't take that decision back. And while abortion and capital punishment are kind of defined by the dividing line between taking a purely innocent life and taking the life of someone who is clearly understands what they are doing, it is ultimately about the sanctity of life rather than our human judgment of what that life is worth. Since for me this is about the sanctity of your life, then it's not about capital punishment being a deterrent to criminals committing crimes, because it's not. It's also not about attempting to rehabilitate someone. It's not about trying to save someone's life that deserves to live, because clearly many of these folks indeed deserve to die for what they did. You might say to me, but Charles, what if someone tortured and murdered one of your family members? A very legitimate question. I would want to kill them with my own two hands, and I would be willing to risk prison to do it. But that is also why we don't put victims or family members of victims on a jury, because they would, in all probability, be unable to separate their personal experiences from rendering a well thought out and just verdict. Some people say that it saves the state and therefore tax-paying citizens money in keeping these people for the remainder of their lives by not having to house and feed them if we go ahead and kill them. Truthfully, I've never really understood that line of reasoning, since what we were basically saying is that our morals are for sale. In other words, we should put murderers to death because it saves us money. Some advocate that these evil, monstrous people will pose a threat to others, even if only to other prisoners. Well, then we should separate them from the general population to the degree necessary to ensure the safety of other inmates. The truth is that capital punishment for those who believe in it is completely about punishment and retribution. And to their credit, most capital punishment advocates will freely admit this. The bottom line is that I'm not sure beyond any doubt that capital punishment is morally right or wrong. But just as in the case of abortion, I have decided, for myself at least, that if I'm going to make an error in my judgment, that it will be on the side of life rather than death, even if that life I'm saving doesn't seem to have any redeeming value at all. As usual, I am willing to discuss this or any other topic of the day with anyone who enjoys lively debates. If you did, please take a little bit of your time to write comments, engage in discussions, and hit that little subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. I hope that you thoroughly enjoyed this most recent installment of The Patriot Preacher. And until next time, goodbye and God bless you all.